Everyone, this is Columbus Planning Commission meeting tonight, and it's September 21st, 2022. The time is 6:31 p.m. I'd like to call it to order, and the first thing on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody please stand, take your hats off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll go to the third item on the agenda, which is a motion approval of tonight's meeting agenda. Anybody like to make that approval motion?
This is Barb Bobick, so moved.
This is Bob, I'll second.
Having a motion on the floor. Any discussion? Any questions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote.
Chris, aye.
Ron, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bob, aye.
We'll go to item number 4 on the agenda. Motion, we need approval of September 7th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
This is Bob, so moved.
This is Barb, I'll second that.
Having a motion on the floor, is there any discussion? Any questions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote.
Abstain.
Ron, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bob, aye.
Thank you. We'll go to item number 5 on the agenda, which is a public hearing and discussion. 9743 192nd Avenue Northeast Variance. Accessory structure setback, Andrea Rasmussen and Sean Homa, pages 1 through 17 and A1 through A16. Ella, would you like to read the notice as published in the Times?
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held at the City of Columbus Planning Commission on Wednesday, September 21st, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as parties may be heard. The hearing will be conducted in person and by interactive technology at the Columbus City Hall located at 16319 Kettle River Boulevard, Columbus, Minnesota, to consider a request for a variance to reduce an accessory structure setback from the required 20 feet to 8 feet and to reduce a wetland setback for structures from 16.5 feet to 14.5 feet. Members of the public interested in attending in person, monitoring the meetings, or who want more information should contact the city offices at 651-464-3120 or visit the city website at columbusmn.us. The hearing shall continue until all evidence and testimony have been received. Applicant Andrea Rasmussen and Sean Homa, property owner the same. Property location 9743 192nd Avenue Northeast, Columbus, Minnesota. Legal description as written. Signed Elizabeth Mersko, zoning administrator. Submitted to Forest Lake Times on 8/31/22. Published in Forest Lake Times and posted on 9/8/22.
Thank you, Ella. At this time, for the record, would Andrea Rasmussen and Sean Homa, the applicants, please have a seat up front here. State your name and your address, your current address. Thank you.
Andrea Rasmussen, 9743 192nd Avenue Northeast.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Excuse me. As is normal protocol, and in the letter that you received from Frank, we usually start off, even though we read your narrative and that, would you explain what you want to do and your plans?
Absolutely. So I put together a couple PowerPoint slides. When we originally purchased the property, you can advance. We have a 41-acre parcel, and there's approximately 3 acres of what I'll call non-wetland or dry land, as they say, that is near the driveway. And so this was the original layout of our plan for our structures. We plan someday to put in a barn for our animals. We also planned in putting in a pole structure, pole building. You can see it next to the green marking there. on the slide. What we didn't realize was that that first arrow on the left is where we thought the original pole building would be. However, when it was staked, it was in the middle of our road towards what will be the barn someday. We didn't realize that that nice grassy area was in a wetland. So we had to go to Plan B. Next slide. So the only other viable location for us is this green square for that accessory structure. I marked where the sewer was there. We worked with our sewer and dirt guy to build a road that can go back there along the side of our house. Given its proximity to the house, and because I'm fussy about how it looks, I guess, the pole building's out, and it has to be a stick-built so that the siding can match the house. It can look like part of our setup. The reason we're here is because of the proximity of where that is located. We are requesting a variance to help with accessibility for getting in and out of the structure. Next slide. So I just put in a copy of the request, but it was as you guys read. There's a image there of the structure as proposed on the print, and then the red line is where I believe that what we're asking for from a variance. Next slide. Just a couple of photos for folks. The first image on the left is looking northeast down the new driveway that's along the side of the garage so that we can access the site. The photo on the right is looking south from behind the house, and we have a large boulder wall there that holds the dirt up against the garage. So that's in between, that will be in between the front corner of the garage and that rock wall. Next slide. And then this first image on the left is the proposed building site from the deck of the house. You can maybe make out the high lines that are there. That property is right next to the high line. And then the image on the right is looking north at the proposed site as you come down the hill towards it. And then I put together a video. I have no idea if this will play. If you do the control click on it, it should play, maybe.
I'm sorry, I know I stated that we might be able to, but
It's not gonna work?
yeah,
Okay.
I tried a little earlier.
That's okay. Next slide. Okay, so we have, the reason this comes up is we have multiple trailers that we intend to store in that structure. And we encounter a lot of difficulty with those trailers in terms of proximity of the structure to the driveway and ultimately the trailer, which means hitting the front corner of the building as you're trying to come down. And possibly the height of, we have an enclosed trailer and a car trailer. Depending on what we do with that structure, I wouldn't want to hit the soffit. I'm not saying I wouldn't be driving, but there is a possibility. Navigation away from the rock wall, so as you're making a wide turn to come down such that your trailer doesn't hit the rock wall. And then, of course, in the winter, sliding on that driveway. So those are what we plan to encounter. Yep. And then there's also backing into the garage. There isn't enough distance really to straighten out that trailer to back into what I call the north stall. There'll be 2 garage doors. I know that we can't use the south stall to back into because the proximity is just too close. Even with the variance, I can't get in there. But without the variance, I can't get in on the north stall either. And then I just put together with the variance in place, it does remedy things for us, reduces the possibility of damage to our structure or our vehicles. It allows us to use that north stall This is our retirement home. We are aging. I don't intend, or I guess I shouldn't say that. I would imagine our driving skills will get worse as we get older, so it would be ideal to get in there now. It also makes the garage functional for us. I know that in the South Bay, we will still have to use an ATV to move trailers in and out in that stall. But it will, by getting the variance, it will significantly reduce our difficulty using this property. And I did a little homework, which I'm not sure is relevant, but I called a couple of the other cities to find out how they dealt with that property sideline. And they follow the Minnesota State Building Codes with a 3 foot, being 3 feet away with a firewall, or 5 foot away with without a firewall. And I did contact the city of Wyoming about it, since they are my neighbor there on that Highline side, and they confirmed that they follow that same code. And that's what I got.
It was very, very
Recording in progress.
narrative. I have one question for you, Andrea. Where's your secondary septic system?
So if you go to the first slide, I highlighted it in purple on there, and both the first 50 and the second 50-year sewers are inside that purple box.
Okay.
So it will not interfere with second 50-year sewer.
Okay, thank you. Very nice narrative. Anybody have any questions up here that you'd like to ask Andrea?
Yeah, this is Bob. Once again, what are the trailers used for?
We have a fishing boat, we have an enclosed trailer, we have a car trailer, we have a dump vehicle. We have a bunch of different vehicles that go through. You need the car trailer to haul the dump vehicle.
Do you have a business running at your house, or
No.
okay.
Nope, these are just recreational.
Recreational vehicles,
Yes.
trailers?
Yep.
Okay. On the proposed garage, it's hard to tell the pitch of the roof matching up with the existing house. It looks like it might be a 4 or 5/12 pitch.
612 is what I
612?
planned. I'm negotiating with the builder, because I would like to make it look a little bit more like my house, which is a 712 pitch, but 612 is kind of what we agreed on for the short term for the dollars.
And then the height of the ridge board, how high would you say that is after you complete it, or what's the proposed design?
I don't know the answer to that question.
It looks like it's 36 by 48 in dimension
That's the footprint of the building, yep.
at a 612 pitch, so it's about another 6 feet above the 8-foot wall, roughly. Okay,
Yep.
all right, thank you.
I do know that I asked for larger garage doors, so I'm assuming that means that the walls on the front have to go up a little bit, another foot or two.
Okay, yep. All right, thank you.
Hi, this is Chris. I know you talked about adding gutters to the
Absolutely.
building, and who was it, Becky Wozni? Mentioned that you don't need gutters because of you really have nothing on either side of you, I mean, where the water's going, correct?
Correct.
But you still plan on putting gutters on?
100%.
Okay, and this is an area where they can never build to the other side of or where this is going and bordering. I know I went over there, and you have a very nice spot. It looks like power lines come through there, and it's quite a distance. I mean, we're talking quite a distance from, even if somebody was to build on the other side, you're pretty far away. You mentioned, too, you're building another barn?
Well, that's the plan. This is the 10-year plan.
Okay.
And there's dollars associated with it, so we built the house first, and then we put in the pool, and now we need now I don't want to look at anything anymore, so now it needs a garage, and then hopefully the animals will make it someday to a barn. That's the plan.
And you have a pigeon coop back there?
Correct.
You got quite the spot back there.
We do, we love it.
Yeah, I bet you do. It's very nice back there. Yeah, no, I don't have really any other questions.
Barb?
No, you hit on the questions I had. I was concerned about the drainage on the other property, but if it isn't going to be sold or anything, shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I don't, there's really nothing that can go alongside you over there.
Well, Andrea, I've been to your place twice, I think. It was a swimming pool in this one. But for tonight's record, I just got to ask you these questions to put it on record. Did you receive the staff report from the city dated September 16th?
Yes,
And they had all their findings and their conditions noted out for our recommendations on page 15.
maybe I didn't receive that.
It's dated September 16th, 2022.
Was that the packet in the email?
Yeah, so they're looking at the page numbers on the bigger packet with your application. I think
okay.
yours was like 6 pages long.
Okay.
The only reason I'm asking is if you read it and that if you had any questions about it or anything you want to bring up. Or, okay, thank you. Nobody has any other? Okay, then we're going to open up the floor for a public hearing. Anyone who has an interest in this matter and wants to present testimony as evidence on the issue, please acknowledge themselves by stating their name and address, after which you have the floor to speak. Is there anybody online there?
This is Amy Sieben. I am the adjacent property owner. I live at 9623 192nd Avenue Northeast. I have some questions about this and going along with the barn that's to be built in the first slides that were shown, the premise that the garage would have been in the road and that was the reason for this move to the east side of the property. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, the structure, where we thought the structure would be was in a wetland. So to put it not in a wetland, it would be in the center of the road and right next to our pool. So, so yeah, it's not feasible where it is.
Wasn't this whole property a wetland before it was filled for the building structures that are there?
No.
Okay,
Is that all?
so
Oh.
you had showed this slide that's up right now and the original proposed structure, and then you showed something in green after that was to the west of that. That one. Go back one. No, there.
Yep.
What is the green square there?
That's where, when you look at the property, as you stand from the pool, it looks like a nice green grassy area. It looks like a great spot to build a pole building. However, that is in a wetland, so the structure cannot go there.
So the green box is the proposed, or the green box is the wetland?
The proposed is this slide here, with the structure along the power line.
Now go back to the previous slide that was on. That green box right there.
Correct.
What is that green box?
When we got our survey, we were surprised as to where the location of that pole structure was going to be when they staked it out. And we said, we can't do that because we thought that that was, we didn't realize that it was wetland over there. So we had to move where we intended to put that second structure.
For clarification, the screen that is on the screen currently, and this is Elizabeth Mersko, City Administrator, the proposed accessory building is now going to be located, the new green box, the filled-in solid box, is where the location of the proposed accessory building will be.
I do understand that. I just want to know what the premise for the whole moving it was from one side of the property to the other.
Do you have anything else, Emily?
No.
Well, Thank you for your call. Is there anyone else that'd like to make a statement? I'd like to advise everybody that we don't usually allow people who make comments to talk to the applicant. If they ask questions, they should ask it to the commissions, and we'll ask them to respond later. But thank you anyway, Emily. Is there anybody else that'd like to say something? The floor is open. Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll open it up for a discussion amongst the commissioners here. Elizabeth's got some.
Mr. Chair and our Planning Commission members, I wanted to make a clarification, an item that was testimony given during the public hearing. This property is quite large, and it does have quite a bit of upland, but I will say during the subdivision process, it was a subdividable lot. It had a buildable area. It did have area for primary and secondary septic system. So I think as the applicant indicated, they're trying to use every bit of upland they can, as it's a very large lot, but a small portion of it is upland, which is why, as the presentation was made, why they really have limited areas to put the things that they have described to you. So the area where the accessory building was first proposed, it is indicated on the map that it is wetlands, so I think it was determined that it was, and so the applicant had to find an alternate site for her pole building. So as we understand, throughout Columbus, we're 70% wetland or open water, and I think we see that property owners try to use their upland as best they can.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hank, do you have anything you'd like to make a comment about this?
I think Elizabeth covered everything pretty well, as well as the applicant. So, yeah, I don't really have too much to add to my report. I do recommend approving it. Other than that, that's all I have. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Bob, anything?
Oh, Frank, just get used to it because we ask a lot of questions of our planning associate, so,
Sounds good.
yeah, be prepared.
Chris, do you have anything?
No, I would just like to state that, I mean, this is exactly what variances are for. And, you know, with variance findings, you've laid out a good reason for the difficulties in that. And other than that, I think, you know, you have a lot of land, but very little usable land.
Barb, do you have anything?
I have nothing.
Well, we have a different format tonight, so I only say that because we usually look at them to make, anybody wants to make a motion, we usually go refer back to your report, kind of on findings and conditions. So does anybody like to make a motion on this variance?
This is Bob. I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the variance request to the City Council to reduce the side yard and wetland setback. The side yard would be from 20 feet to 8 feet, and the wetland setback required would be from 16.5 feet to 15.5 feet for Andrea Rasmussen and Sean Homa, Lot 1, Block 1, Delmonico Preserve. Property identification number 25-33-22-11-0004.
Can I just verify, is it 15 or 14.5 as stated? The wetland setback from 16 feet to 14.5?
I'm sorry, it's to 15.5.
Okay, so your public hearing notice is incorrect?
Yeah. I must have made a typo.
Okay,
So is the motion intact? Okay?
motion intact.
Okay.
Commissioner Barron's, there is, on page 4, there is 2 conditions as recommended by the planner. So
Yes, I will add plus 2 commissioners as, 2 conditions as per the recommendation by city staff. Number 1, the applicant proposed accessory structure shall not exceed the proposed dimensions as outlined in the building application packet received July 21st, 2022, and variance pack dated and completed August 19th, 2022. The second condition is the applicant must submit any and all other materials required by the Planning and Zoning and Building Department to complete the building permit application review.
Is there a second?
This is Chris, I'll second.
Is there any discussion, any questions? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Chris, aye.
Ron, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bob, aye.
The motion passes. And Andrea, the city council will get this next week on the 28th, I believe.
Best
So,
wishes.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Go on to item number 6, public hearing and discussion, 8145 Broadway Avenue Northeast, Kennel, interim use permit, Barb and Fran Heerly, pages 18 through 50, and A17 to A22. Ella, would you like to read the notice as published?
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held at the City of Columbus Planning Commission on Wednesday, September 21st, 2022, at 6:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as parties may be heard. The hearing will be conducted in person and by interactive technology at the Columbus City Hall, located at 16319 Kettle River Boulevard, Columbus, Minnesota, to consider a request for an interim use permit to operate a residential dog kennel with 4 or more dogs. Members of the public interested in attending in person, monitoring the meetings, or who want more information should contact the city offices at 651-464-3120 or visit the city website at columbusmn.us. The hearing shall continue until all evidence and testimony has been received. Applicants are Barb and Fran Heerly, property owner Fran Heerly, property location 8145 West Broadway Avenue Northeast, Columbus, Minnesota. Legal description as written. Signed Elizabeth Mersko, zoning administrator. Submitted to Forest Lake Times on 9/1/22. Posted and published in the Forest Lake Times on 9/8/22.
Thank you, Ella. You must be Barb and Fran, huh?
Yes.
Haley, thank you. Would you state your full names or your names and your address just for the record?
Fran Hurley. Your address? 8145 West Broadway Avenue, Columbus, Minnesota.
Thank you.
And Barb Hurley, 8145 West Broadway Avenue, Columbus, Minnesota.
Thank you. And also for tonight, as a normal protocol, as you probably if you sat through the last one, even though we read your whole introduction and that, would you explain what you want, your permit and, I mean, your kennel license? If you would explain what you have, your dogs and.
Sure. Yep, there we go. It's up on the board. So we've got 6 whippets. Deuce, who is 9, Angel, who's 8, Lola, who is 5, Meatloaf, who is 4, Valerie, who's 2, and our puppy, Halford. So, and then if you go to the next one, we do a lot of activities with our dogs. We race them, we course them, we show them, we do obedience with them, and we do dock diving with them. And there's just a couple pictures there of some of the stuff we do. And this is a hobby for us. This is not a money-making issue or anything like this. We get ribbons and toys is what we win. Mostly it just takes up our money and our time, and that's about it. And then, but most of all, they're just our pets. They're just our family. We don't have any children. We've got dogs. So they live in the house. Whippets are not outside dogs. If in the winter they need to wear coats, they need to wear boots. In the summer, they need to be in the air conditioning. So, and so that's why we are looking for a kennel permit, just so that we can have our 6 dogs.
Well, I've seen all your, your packet, and it was very informative, and with your dogs and their names and all that. Also, for tonight's record, did you receive that copy of the report made by the staff dated September 16th?
Yes.
And you read it all?
Yes.
And you understand everything they say in it? I mean, do you have any questions about it? Or?
No, we've actually been talking to Frank. We did have some questions. He answered them all, and we were told we needed to actually have ask for another permit for some of the events we have on our property. So I've got an application for that, which I give to you.
Are you going to be around afterwards, or probably not?
You can hand it to him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you want to just hand it to me, I can.
Okay, and then I've got to make out a check to just the city of Columbus.
And that we can just go on with the hearing, and after you're finished, we can take care of the other business.
Okay, all right. Okay, so that was the only issue we had.
Okay. Well, this is kind of different because we got the kennel. We're going to have to ask Megan a question on this.
Yes, absolutely. So what's before you this evening is the kennel CUP permit, and that's what's before you at this point in time. That's what's subject to the public hearing process. And then if you wish to discuss the licensing question, after we have heard the public hearing, we have conducted the public hearing, we have heard all of the findings that the planning staff has put together with regards to the kennel CUP. Then after that has closed and this board has made a determination upon that, then we would move on to that secondary question.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody here have any questions for Barb or Fran?
Yeah, this is Chris. I know you said you have an application now for your events, and I think that's been one of the questions. There was a complaint because of races you hold, and you hold races there, correct?
Yeah.
And are they sanctioned events, or please explain what your event is?
So I'm not sure what you mean by sanctioned. It's a
What?
hobby, so
Okay.
it's no different than like a bunch of people getting together and having an obedience trial with the dog, or let's see, yeah, or like agility, where you get the dogs out there and then they go through all the tunnels and the stuff like that. So that's kind of what it is.
But it's a posted item that's through what, I mean, I noticed.
Yeah, the parent club is called
Okay.
Continental Whippet Alliance.
And I was just looking at what we were given, and it looked like there was 5 different events that were held at Columbus, or listed as being held in Columbus.
Yeah.
So what exactly goes on? This is like an obstacle course, or what is it?
It's actually racing.
Okay.
So I'll step back a little bit. Whippets were bred to chase rabbits. And that is what their whole goal in life was when they were kind of evolved in England. The rich people had greyhounds, and the poor people had whippets.
Okay.
Because the rich people or the poor people were not allowed to have whippets, or allowed to have greyhounds. So they had the whippets, and the whippets would catch rabbits for the dinner pot. And then the whippets were also bred to keep you warm in bed. So they like to snuggle. So those are their goals in life: chase rabbits, cuddle in bed. And so along with some of the other sight hounds, they like to chase things. And so there's different venues of racing types that they do. One of them is straight line racing, and that's where you put the whippets in like a starting gate, and then they run 200 yards, and the first dog over the line wins. Another venue is you have a course set up in a large field, and a little white bag zigzags through the field, and the dogs chase it. and they catch their little rabbit at the end.
It's
And-
called lure coursing.
Lure coursing. And of course, the other one is the one that greyhounds do, which is oval track racing, which, you know, they go in a circle and they chase the little toy that goes around a circle. The oval track racing and lure coursing actually require large areas. We do lure coursing down in Farmington, Minnesota at the Dakota County Fairgrounds, and then there's a place up in Ramsey County where they do the oval track. So we just get a bunch of people together that have whippets, and we draw names, and they race against each other, and with the faster ones with the faster ones, and the slower ones with the slower ones. The ones that win the most win the meet, and what they really win is stuffed toys. We give out stuffed toys for our gifts, and you know, so the winner might get the first choice of stuffed toy, and everybody gets a toy. And then after we do that, we have a little fun match, like a dog show where everybody parades their dog around, and we have a judge, and they say, oh, this one's the prettiest one, and then they get a toy. And then after that, we usually sit down and have dinner. That's pretty much it.
Just to explain the racing a little bit more, there's 4 programs. Each dog runs 4 times. So the first program, they run according to their grade, which is how many points they got their last time running. And then after they all run once, they all get points for where they finish in the race. So the ones with the most points run against each other, and the ones with less points run against each other. So they shuffle it up, and they actually run 4 times. And then at the end, there's a winner and second, third. It goes from the top to the bottom.
And again, it's a hobby, no different than something like agility or obedience. There's no betting, there's nothing like that. It's just a bunch of dog people getting together, doing what their dogs do. And as for the complaint we received, we did reach out to that person and have since invited him to our events, and he seems to be okay with them now. So,
But per our city with, assemblies, social functions, and that if you hold them multiple times or that you need to pull a permit, correct? And that's what you're willing to do right now?
right, when we talked to the city last year, so we'll step back here even further. When we first before we moved to Columbus 10 years ago, we actually called the city and we said, this is what we do. We have these dogs. This is what we do. Is this going to be a problem? Is this something we can do in your city before we even purchase property? Yeah. And they said, no, that's something you can do, but what you have to do is you have to get a kennel permit. So as soon as we moved in, we got the kennel permit. Mm-hmm. And we didn't realize that we had to get a permit for the other stuff. So apparently this guy said something. So then we had a discussion with Jessica Hughes last year on kind of, yes, I don't know if you remember, you're right there. And it appeared from the ordinance that if we did not charge entry fees, if we weren't charging an admission, then we were exempt from needing a permit. But this year, when we talked to Frank, he said that was not the case, and that the attorney was interpreting that differently from the way we read it and from the way that it had been read previously, and that we needed a permit. So I have a permit application.
Okay, and Megan?
Yep. So I think there's some important language here that does matter. So what's before you this evening is a conditional use permit.
Interim.
An interim use permit, thank you so much. See, language does matter. And the lawyer gets it wrong all the time. An interim use permit for the kennels with more than the limited number of dogs. The secondary application is actually a license, and that's under Chapter 4 of the city code. And so a license is required, and just to be super clear about what a license is, it's a $20 inspection fee, and it allows the city to review sort of the impacts of what we would consider a large assembly. And a large assembly is defined by the code as a gathering of 50 or more people at any location at any single time for any purpose. And what the code provision says is a license required where there's a large assembly or there is a fee charged for admission for a long list of events. Races would be one of those that would be incorporated by those events. And so, so based upon the size of the gathering, that's where this is triggered here.
I I'm gonna jump in there. We've
Yep,
never had
absolutely.
over 50 people. We're talking maybe 15 people tops. We've never had over 50 people.
So as we understand it, the last sign up for one of the events was for over 25 dogs, which is what led us to the understanding that reasonably you would have a dog and then a couple, and there could be, more
Oh,
than those type
no,
of
there are
people
people
along the
like
way.
us. 2 people, 6 dogs.
Okay. Yeah, so what we would, so two sections of this conversation. So the first section of the conversation is what's before you tonight is the Planning Commission. The second is the licensure requirement based upon how the events are structured. And that's a conversation that we absolutely can have. And so what I would encourage you to do this evening is to make a determination based upon the application that was submitted for the IUP. And city staff will work to address the follow-up questions with regard to the licensing as we move forward.
I've got a question, Megan. Is this something that, not that Barb and Fran snuck in, but is this something we should have on an ordinance, that if you're going to have a dog kennel license, so this doesn't come up, like,
So I think that these are unique circumstances. I think the code sufficiently covers it in terms of your licensing section. The use that we're looking, so there's a difference between a use and a license. And so our use is those common reoccurring events that you're holding. That's the purpose of the place. Here, the purpose of the place is your home, and then you have gatherings, and those gatherings may have impacts around the surrounding neighborhood. They may have traffic impacts and things like that, of which the city can be assistive with. For example, if you had 100 people for a race one evening, we might want to have signs that were helping to direct traffic. That's something that the city could be assistive of and would be part of the licensing review. Another thing would be, if you have that many people, oftentimes sanitation is a question. So are there sufficient restroom facilities, things of that nature? And that's what the licensing process is for those sort of pop-up events, as compared to the long-term use of having 6 dogs at their home.
okay, thank you, Megan. I do remember, did you have a race here a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
We did.
Yeah, I went by at your place, and
Yeah, lots of people come by and watch.
well, I seen the campers setting out in your front yard, not your front yard, I don't know where your front yard is.
That's our front yard.
Yeah, I
our
seen that
driveway,
camper
yeah.
there. Any other comments, anybody?
Well, I just have a question. How come they didn't know about this before? Is someone in the, maybe it should have been mentioned to them previously?
10
May
years
I
ago?
also comment that we've been holding races for 8 years.
Yeah.
Nobody ever said nothing. I mean, it's right out there in the open. Everybody knows we do it. We've never had any complaints.
Yeah, we usually invite the neighbors.
We invite the neighbors
The
over.
one that complained was a ways down the road, so we hadn't invited him. So, and apparently he felt left out.
So,
Well, it's-
yeah, I don't understand why all of a sudden now it's a problem.
Yeah,
We've been doing this for 8 years.
that's what I'm questioning too.
Yeah.
I don't know how we would resolve a situation like that.
Well, and again, I think I told Frank, it's not we're not trying to get away with anything here.
Exactly.
We had no idea. Like I said, when
Yep.
we first moved in, we were told that what we needed was a kennel permit, and so that's what we went and
Right.
got. So, and then after that one guy did say something, then we thought, when we looked at the thing, we thought, well, we don't have over 50 people, and, we're not doing a lot of this other stuff, and so it doesn't really seem to apply. The only thing that seemed to apply was maybe if we were charging entry fees, and so we said, well, fine, we won't charge entry fees, it's free, and so then we thought, okay, well, fine, then we don't, then we don't meet the criteria anymore, we're kosher, we're doing everything right.
Right.
But then, like I said, this year, when Frank looked into it, he said we did need a permit, even if we don't charge any money, and even if we have less than 50 people.
Right. I just feel badly that you feel, that.
Well, and we don't make money on these.
Exactly.
It's not
And
a
you've been
money
doing
making
it for
thing.
a number of years.
We pay for the food for the
Yeah.
meal afterwards,
Yeah.
We pay
and
for the
main-
toys.
and, yeah, we pay for the toys, we maintain the property. We don't make any money for what,
Yeah, it's-
even when we were charging entry fees, it was like $10 or $12 a dog.
Yeah, and that just mostly covered the food and the toy and and the donation that we had to give to the parent company. So, yeah, it just, and I mean, we like doing it. It's fun, it's our hobby.
It's a blast.
You know, so if you guys want a license, if that's the way this falls out, we'll figure it out. We'll have to charge people now to go in and pay for the license, but,
Yeah, we just didn't want you to feel like you were being persecuted or something. It's just unfortunate that it, wasn't made clear to you previously.
well, I think when you look, I'm sorry, but when you look at that, it's very confusing.
Yeah.
I know like when I talked to Frank, I read it completely differently than what he did and what you did. So,
That's why we have attorneys.
yeah.
And they all have opinions, too. Anything else? I'd just like to ask you one more, just for the record. Did you get that letter by the staff dated September 16th? They gave the findings of facts, recommendations, and conditions?
Yes,
What, you did? And you understand it? Do you have any questions about it, or?
no.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll open up the hearing to the public. Anyone who has an interest in this matter and wants to present testimony as evidence on the issues, please acknowledge themselves by stating their name and address, after which you have the floor to speak. Is there anybody online? I better ask for anybody in the other room.
Oh, that's right.
We'll give a couple minutes for them to get over here. Well, since nobody came forth, we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll have a discussion amongst the commissioners. Any comments, Bob?
The only comment I really have, and I want you folks to understand that we're a growing community, and we see all kinds of different applications through the Planning Commission. And this is a process that we go through to protect the livelihood and community-based output of Columbus. And so we want to protect our neighbors from any types of nuisances. So if we ask questions, it's simply to gather more information. We're not judging or anything else. I'm sorry if you felt that way through this process, but that's not our intent. Here is just to gather the information, take the information at hand, and make decisions based on that information. So you haven't done anything wrong. We just have rules. So as the city grows, our ordinances change, and we create new ordinances, and we amend old ordinances to accommodate today's community. So as you said, you've been doing this for 8 years. Well, your permit expired, and so now you're trying to renew it. In those 8 years, things have changed a little bit. So we're just trying to get the right information. So it's simply a matter of trying to get things right. So when we make decisions, we've done the best we could with the information at hand. So that's all I had.
Barb?
No, I don't have any further questions.
Chris?
I just want to understand this. These are two separate issues.
That is correct. The interim use
Okay.
permit is for simply having more than 4 dogs.
Right.
Because they have more than 4 dogs, their entertainment and activities include dog races. So I think while one requires the interim use permit, the other, in this particular case, may require the event license. There may be an annual license that they can do because their events are several times a year versus just coming in every time they have an event. So I think we'll iron out the details with our city attorney and make sure that going forward, everyone's on the same page.
Perfect.
Okay, so we need a motion on the kennel license first.
Right.
Anybody like to make a motion?
This is Barb. I'll make a motion. A motion to recommend to move forward with the interim use permit. Is the number the same? Elizabeth, will it be the IUP PC 22-112?
It will be, yes.
Okay. For the Hurleys at 8145 West Broadway Avenue Northeast in Columbus, parcel number 03-32-22-41-0005, to approve the interim use permit and forward it to the City Council for approval with findings of facts 1 through 17 and recommendations 1 through 26. Is there anything else that needs to be on there?
No.
I think so. Anybody want to second that?
This is Bob, I'll second.
Any discussion? Any questions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote.
Chris, aye.
Ron, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, now we'll get to talk about the permit.
Yes, absolutely. So what I would recommend your motion is to direct city attorney staff to reach out to the applicants about when a permit or when a license from the city of Columbus is needed, and the menu of options that are available for either a year-based license or an event-based license.
The motion's to make you discuss with them, or?
Yeah, in conjunction with city staff, absolutely.
Okay, all right, all right. Anybody want to make that motion, or can we ditto that, just what you said?
You absolutely can.
Okay. And we'll take
Perfect.
anybody want to second it?
I'll second it. This is Chris.
Okay, any discussion? Any comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote.
Chris, aye.
Ron, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Barb and Sean. Next Wednesday night, you get to come back if you want.
So, yeah, so what does that mean, what you guys just did?
Oh, yes, so this body just approved your application for an interim use permit, and directed its staff to reach out to you to follow up about the licensing application you received this evening, and to give you a final interpretation of what the words of the code mean and when a license is required.
Okay, and so I actually filled one out. Should I just hand it to you?
You can hold on to that until we reach out. Thank you so much. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks for taking the
Thank
time to
Thank you.
educate us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I never knew what a whippet was until you came here.
Hey, if you have a dog named Meatloaf, you can't be all bad.
Thank you.
Thanks for sending all the pictures.
Yeah.
They were the highlight of our day today.
They are adorable. Thank you.
All right, we're down to item number 7 on the agenda. It's a discussion, residential zone business moratorium study, pages 51 through 75. Discussion, meeting 5, invisibility, compliance, exemptions, and prohibitions. Having a hard time talking tonight, Jessica.
That's okay. Good evening, Planning Commission. We're back for meeting 5. So we're getting to the end of this. Tonight, we're going to talk about a few different important items. And I'm working from, as you mentioned, pages, I believe it's 52 through 70-something.
75.
75. Mostly, though, 52 through 58, the memo that I sent out to you last week. And we'll just dive right in. So we're going to start off with a discussion about the term invisible and what it truly means, because the term is in our code right now. And the term invisible has the connotation that it literally means you don't see any activity going on. And I indicated in my memo that there are a few different things that we've discussed that would essentially make the home occupation not invisible, right? We're allowing a car or a commercial vehicle to be parked outside. We're allowing some activity to go on outside. We're allowing customers to come and go, traffic of commercial vehicles to come and go. And so arguably, that's not invisible, right? And I'm curious to hear your perspective on it, because I think that we throw the term out invisible as it's a good goal. Practically, though, I don't know that we can, if you truly, truly, truly want invisible, I think we just don't allow home occupations at all, right? Is my perspective on it. The code really does say that the home occupation shall be considered invisible to adjacent properties to the extent practicable. So I'm just kind of curious what you all think and if we want to keep that line of text in the ordinance.
This is Bob, and thank you for that clarification. When I read invisible, my mind interprets it as nuisance neutral or no negative impacts to the surrounding neighbors in the community. So when I see the word invisible, that's how I read it to intend. And so if we want to change the language to nuisance neutral or no negative impacts, we can do that to further clarify it. But that's my intent when I read it.
And that is the sense that I got from the group when you all used the term invisible. I think that's what I understood it to mean. But I want to make sure we're on the same page.
Well, I agree with what Janet Eglin put in there about the idea that some people have 20 acres, and that's really invisible if they've got a lot of surrounding compared to somebody on a 1 acre lot. So I think it does jump around the invisibility. But I think what Bob was saying kind of goes into effect on that issue. Because I agree with her on the idea that some of us can have a business and you wouldn't even know what's going on if they're on 10 acres or 20 or 40.
However, if we're let's take that line of thought a little further. So up to this point, I don't think that we've made any regulations based on lot size. So we have not said, yes, you can have outdoor storage if you have 20 acres or more, or yes, you can have outdoor storage if you have dense tree cover.
This is Chris. I think we kind of covered that when we talked about any type of, that there was no outdoor storage.
Right, regardless of lot size.
Regardless of lot size. That it didn't matter with screening or anything else. Whatever was part of that business had to be in a certain percentage of a pole building or a certain percentage of the house. So to me, that still is invisible. And I don't think that should change.
I would agree.
I agree.
And when you say invisible, though, Chris, you mean invisible in the sense of nuisance neutral or
Pretty much, yes.
low impact to neighbors? Okay. So maybe we're in agreement to take the word invisible out and replace it with something like shall have a low impact on adjacent properties, or
I still like invisible.
you still like invisible?
I do. I think.
I think invisible is the place to start.
Yep.
And it does say to the extent practicable. So,
You can always
is
put a
that-
footnote to further define it if we need to.
okay,
I think people understand it more.
yeah. I think we're all on the same page. Any other comments on invisibility?
No.
Okay.
No,
All right, so we'll keep that one in there. We're going to move on to compliance. It's a big topic right now. Currently, we have, what I put down in our recommendation is a rough outline of what we currently did, what we currently have been doing to address complaints for suspected residential zone businesses or home occupations. So I'll just briefly kind of run you through that. You know, we receive a complaint, someone says, I think that they're running a business. We would have the way that things are set up now, we would have our community service officer go out and visit the property. They would knock on the door, try to talk to them. If nobody's home, we would have the community service officer take pictures from the side of the road most of the time because the complaints are typically for storage of materials outside. So they would take pictures to confirm the complaint and whether, the complaint is accurate. From that point, if we weren't able to make contact with the homeowner, we would send them a letter and say, you're out of compliance. You need to either get a permit or cease activities, business-related activities, by this certain date. If that date rolled around and they had not, for example, cleaned up the materials that were outside, we would send them another letter. And then if they did not comply with the date in the second letter, we would, at times, occasionally, we did not do this every time, issue a citation. And if after that citation they did not come into compliance again, we would bring the property to the city council to determine the appropriate next steps. So I outlined that in our memo here. And I do want to reiterate that it has been a complaint-driven approach in the past. In the past, we haven't had somebody proactively driving around trying to find problems. We received a complaint and then acted on it. I'm just going to go through these, this A through H one more time and talk about the feedback that we received and see what you all think about making some amendments.
Can I ask a
Oh, please.
question
Yeah.
first, Jessica?
Absolutely.
What's the state statute on this? I mean, it seems we have a letter and a letter and a letter, and it's time. So, I mean, that time period can stretch out, I'm sure, months and months and months and months. And I understand giving people time. I get that. But, I don't, in my mind, 3 letters, if they haven't done it by the first letter, they're not going to do it.
Yes. So the statutory requirement is that the city provide a letter via certified or otherwise traceable mail that explicitly states the time that the homeowner or the property owner has to abate the nuisance and gives succinct steps that need to be accomplished to meet the city's goal. That's step 1. And that if the property owner does not do it by this specific date, that the city council will then schedule a public hearing where the property owner would be given an opportunity to present the why and the how of why they didn't do it, but is very much a mandatory due process requirement as part of all nuisance codes throughout the state and the underlying nuisance law that cities have the authority for. And then the last stage of that is if the city council finds that this is in fact a nuisance violation and makes that finding, then that finding can be enforced through further legal action. And that can be in the case of fines, it can be through criminal prosecution, or it can be through an order for abatement where the city would go in and do the work to clean up the site.
So I think 3 letters is more than the statute requires, but we do have to make sure we are giving the individual due process and notice and a date to comply and all of the things that they need to do to comply.
And what is typically the timing for giving a person? I mean, does the state have a statute on?
So there is a 30-day requirement between the end of the compliance date and the public hearing. That has to do with ensuring that there's appropriate notice and has to be published in the paper and all of those things. I will say from a practical perspective, many cities do use a 3-notice process. I think it works, you get 3 reminders, three strikes and you're out is sort of built into general processes around code enforcement. And those letters might take on different characteristics. So the first one would be a letter saying that this was what was observed, this was the complaint that was made, and you have until X date to clean it up. Typically, cities utilize between 30 to 60 days within their first letter. The goal of the entire completion of the enforcement process is within the year. And the second letter then could have stronger language, and the third letter could serve as that official legal notice that also provides the date and the time of the public hearing if the nuisance is not remedied by that point in time.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, Jessica, sorry.
No, I think that's great. So I think just going to go through here with the feedback that we received. So for under A, there was a question about, whether the city official would discuss the complaint and the steps necessary to get the property into compliance. So I think I would add language in there that the designated city official who is visiting the property would talk to the person about what needs to be done to get the property into compliance. So I would add a little bit of language about that. Also in our feedback, there was some question about the taking pictures of the property from a distance. And I don't know if we want to have a discussion about that, how you all feel about taking pictures of the property from a distance. We could take that out of the ordinance. However, it's hard to document the complaint and ensure that the complaint is valid if we don't take pictures, if the homeowner doesn't let us on the property. And it could lengthen the process a little bit more.
I think everything's photographed now. I mean, police officers can't get out of a car without photographing everything, so I think you're right. I think it should stay in there. But also, just for the record, so the public knows, if a complainant does call in, their name is kept secret, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Columbus is a small community, and oftentimes people can figure out who it is, but they're kept anonymous from city staff.
Thank you. I do think pictures should, whatever way they have of verifying it.
We have to verify, right? I mean, we
Right.
need to make sure that the complaint is accurate.
Well, yeah, if it's one person, two people, but photos seem to.
Well, it's documentation, like you say.
Right.
So I think it sounds kind of sneaky, we'll take pictures from a distance.
I know.
That wording just kind of doesn't, but I know what you're trying to accomplish.
So while we're talking on this is Bob. So we're talking about taking pictures from a distance. Can we also use a drone to access the property?
I don't know
This is technology
I don't-
advancement here
I
we're
mean,
talking about, right?
I mean, if you own property, you own everything above it.
So there are very limited purposes where drones can be utilized for cities, and they cannot be used for code enforcement purposes.
Cannot be.
No.
Okay.
All right.
Good to know.
So pictures from a distance it is, right?
It is, yeah.
But I agree with that comment. We should make contact initially and try to get on site, because there could be a lot of property that is unseen from the street, where you can't take pictures to fully comprehend what the
Right.
nuisance could be, so.
And yep, that's a common issue. So definitely our first approach has always been to try to get on the property and see it with their own eyes, CSOs. And I know that the city is currently having a conversation, the council is, about whether to have a code enforcement officer or another position of some, maybe a different name, but I'm writing this ordinance to just talk about a designated city official, so that it's kind of whoever that person is, whether it's a CSO or a code enforcement officer or somebody else, we're just keeping it general for today. Okay, so we're just going through looking at the feedback that we received. So on C, there was a question that rather than using the word surveyed, we use the word revisited, which I'm fine with that. We're revisiting the property. And then I think that there was feedback to include the process for revoking an IUP in the correspondence that is sent in the second letter. So I think that would be fine to add, because as Megan talked about, you're kind of increasing the severity of these letters as they go on. So in the second one, we could say, hey, if you have an IUP, here's what will happen if you don't come into compliance, because not being in compliance with the IUP conditions gives us the authority to terminate the IUP. So I think that's great to add a little bit of language in the second letter about that. And I guess the last bit that we have in this, the last question I have for you all is how we feel about issuing citations.
I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's too aggressive myself.
What, citation?
Yeah, I don't
mean,
see
after
the
the third
point.
notice?
It would be after the third letter, so after the homeowner doesn't
problem.
comply.
I have no problem with that. Sometimes they can do what they want. It's in their court, then. If they want to go to court, they're going to go to court. So they give their explanation to a third party. And maybe they have a reason for a judge or whatever, but
And
you
I
got
think
to have something. You have to have some power. You
there's
just
got to be
can't-
some teeth to something.
Yeah, you just can't be writing letters and don't do this, we're going to do this. But I think a citation, I mean, if we've gone through that much work, because all those letters are certified, right? So it's costing the city every time we do it, so.
I believe we should have the ability to penalize for noncompliance.
You know, I think there was some recommendations too with, be it the city staff or code compliance, whoever, to work with the person if they're having time restraints or there's certain things. So I think as long as we're willing to work with people, that's one thing. But if you have somebody operating a business with an IUP in a residential area, that is a privilege. And after 3 letters and somebody not wanting to follow what they agreed to, pretty much. I mean, they got the IUP with recommendations and conditions, and it's up to them to follow that in order to have that. You give them 3 times and you work with them, to me, what's the point of doing any of this if we're not going to have some teeth to something? I mean, you might as well throw all this out the window because it means nothing.
Right.
And I do think that people want to comply.
Right.
And I think that, you know, I handled complaints at the city for 5 years, and I think I had the CSOs issue a citation once, maybe twice. So it rarely gets to that point. But I tend to agree that you'd have to have some sort of teeth to it at some point. And historically, I have been. I work with people, I extend timelines, we figure it out. And the last section of this, H, says the city official may deviate from this process if desirable. So if they think, okay, we'll give them a 4th letter instead of issuing a citation, we have the freedom to do that if that's necessary. Sometimes people have a lot of stuff outside that they need to clean up, and it takes them a long time. So I think that there is that freedom to deviate if necessary. Okay, so I think that the majority agrees to keep the citation option in the compliance section. If we don't have any other questions or concerns about the compliance section, I'm happy to move on to the process for existing home occupations / residential zone businesses. Okay, so this is how to handle either people who currently have a residential zone business and an IUP, and how to handle, on the flip side of things, people that are currently running a residential zone business but do not have a permit. So you'll see in my recommendation, the time frame that I put in there is 18 months. And I referenced that a couple times. The reason I chose 18 months goes back to December of last year when the council was considering this moratorium. I think there was a request from the council to put that amount of time in there for people who have IUPs now, when this ordinance goes into effect or when their IUP expires, they would have an additional 18 months to get into compliance. So let me give you an example of that. So if you are currently operating a residential zone business and you have a permit, okay, you have a permit, and your permit expires in December of 2023, you would have 18 months from December 2023 to come into compliance. Let's say you are an individual who is running a business, but you do not have a permit. Once the ordinance goes into effect, you would have 18 months from that day that it goes into effect, probably December 2022, to either apply for a permit, or cease business activities at that location. Is kind of the overview of how I've written this section. How do we feel about the 18-month time frame? Is it too long? Is it too short?
This is Bob. From my perspective, it's too long.
Okay.
A year would be plenty.
These are usually complaint oriented anyway, right? They're usually coming in under complaints.
There is a section that I added under this part that says the city shall commence the process of identifying all existing home occupations that will require interim use permits. So my recommendation is to have city staff research existing home occupations that do not have permits. So that would be not driven by complaints. However, we have a list of people that have been complained about before, and we would certainly reference that list, but I'm saying if, regardless of any new complaints that come in, we would go back and look historically where we've heard there are businesses being run, and we would investigate that, is my recommendation.
I got a couple questions. For the 18 months either way, and I think there was some feedback on this, which I kind of think, is the planning commission, could they potentially get bombarded? Which I don't think is a good idea. I think we need to time things, because we're still under a statute to process these within certain days, correct? And could we be setting ourselves up for failure? I'm just worried about that.
I think that's a fair concern, right? Because I think you have 6 months from the date of an application to get it through the process.
You know, that's pretty reasonable by the time you apply, if it's complete or not. You know, in order to do that, you know, and there's only so many and you're right, it's 60 days that we have to process, or we have to extend another 60, but pretty much you have 120 days to get them through. If you have too many, that'll be a lot to process at one time. So you do want some availability to stagger somehow for residential zone businesses. Or if we're going to call them home occupation too.
Home occupations, yeah.
Home occupation. So that's one concern I have with that, because I think that is a concern. The other, and again, this is feedback driven, you have somewhat of a list generated of businesses that are not operating with an IUP, but you don't know all of them. And I think the recommendation was to do a mass mailing and cover everybody. And if you by chance miss a few, I think is a better idea.
To mail everyone, yeah.
And let them know that this is, you know, the ordinance has changed, these are the rules now, and come in, you know, put an application in. If you don't get any, then you have your list and you can start going. But at least you're not singling people out, plus you're not missing people.
Great.
So I kind of like that thinking.
But the 18 months seems, and once again, this is from the point that their current permit expires. So it could be 2 years out before it expires, and then you're going to give them another 18 months to get in compliance.
For example, if somebody came in to apply for an IUP in 2020 and they were given a 5-year term, then their permit would expire in 2025, and then they would have an additional 18 months on top of that. Is, I believe, how the current ordinance is written when the moratorium was established.
That's how I understood it when you explained it.
Excuse me, this is Barb. How many businesses do you think are out there without an IUP?
Oh, Barb, what a question.
Yeah.
Stir it up, Bar.
There's a lot.
Well, you have to know, because we're talking about,
I don't think we do.
you could get bombarded if everybody, you know, how many are out there? They take, you got 120
I mean,
days.
I probably know 10 in my own neighborhood.
Right.
I know at least that many in my neighborhood.
So, you
Well,
know,
it doesn't make sense then, if you're gonna send out a letter to everybody and say there's 100 of them. Only 100. You still
But-
can't process them all in 18 months.
Out of the 100, hopefully some of them, hopefully a good chunk of them would look at the rules and say, I can't possibly fit into these rules, right? And decide to cease activity at that location. Otherwise, I'm not sure how to handle the staggering of it. Unless, if perhaps a benefit of the 18-month timeframe is that you send out the mailing right away in December 2022, and you hope that people are on top of it and get their permits in throughout that 18-month process rather than right at the end. Otherwise, I just don't know how to handle the staggering part.
Well, don't you think that's something you deal with? You see it coming, and let the
Yeah.
staff try it. If they have a problem, then they go to the council or whatever and say, we're having an issue, and maybe some adjustments have to be made, and
Yeah,
we can deal with it then.
yeah.
But I agree with Bob. I think 18 months is a long time.
I think I heard somebody else throw out a 1-year timeframe. What do we
A
feel
year,
about that?
Pete. I mean, now we're just throwing numbers out there, but a year would probably be fine, but I just think 18 months.
On new applications for IEPs or occupation 2, we already said we're going to do inspections for the first 3 years at annual intervals.
Yep. Yep.
So 12 months seems to be a good number for trying to turn it around and get into compliance with your occupation.
And I'm not sure how that would affect, since the ordinance that went into place establishing this moratorium, I believe, gives existing IUP holders 18 months after the expiration date of their IUP to come into compliance or to apply again under the new rules. So I'm not sure if we change this term to 12 months, I don't know if we can change that for the current language of the ordinance.
It should be consistent.
But then again, that is only for those who currently have permits. So if you can choose 12 months today for those who don't have a permit, I think, Megan, would that be okay? Yeah. So you can say if you don't have a permit, you have 12 months from the date this ordinance goes into effect to apply. Otherwise, if you have a current permit, you'll get the 18-month extension because that's already in our ordinance for the moratorium. It says any existing residential zone business legally authorized as of the effective date cannot be terminated or lose the right to operate during the moratorium or during the 18 months following expiration of the interim use permit for such use.
and it says it.
Yeah. So we'll make the change to 12 months for those who don't have a permit, and we will keep the 18 months for those who do have permits. And that, again, that's 18 months from the expiration of their interim use permit or 12 months from the date that the ordinance goes into effect. Kind of 2 tracks going, working at once. We're going to add citywide mailing to go out once the ordinance goes into effect, kind of putting the whole city on notice. And we will also be sending letters to the current, those who have an interim use permit with kind of personalized deadlines, saying, hey, your permit expires in 2024, just so you know, you have until 18 months from that date in 2024 to apply under the new rules. So we'll send those letters out as well. And do we have any other questions about this topic? I think that we covered everything that I had.
Nothing here.
Right. Cool. Okay.
Cool.
Cool. Okay, the next section is exemptions. So these are certain types of businesses or activities that simply would be exempt from this ordinance. So this ordinance would not apply to them. And as I was thinking about this, I was just thinking about certain activities that I didn't feel it was necessary to have them go through the full permitting process, pay the fee, go to the council, go to the planning commission. And I thought that it would be appropriate to exempt them from this ordinance. So you can choose to disagree with me by all means. The first one was one-on-one tutoring services. The second one, I put instrument instruction for groups less than 10, and I did intend for that to be musical instruments. And then the third is kind of the Tupperware party exception, product sales with private social events if they happen 4 times or less per year. So like your Mary Kay, your Tupperware. And then the last one I had on there is daycare facilities that are regulated by the state. And that's just because I think the state does a pretty good job of regulating them. So any discussion on those recommended exemptions, anything that you think we should add or take away?
Yeah, the number 1 is just a catch-all, huh?
Yeah.
This is Barb. I kind of like the wording that Shelley Logan had. Exemptions may be granted due to private education, periodic sales, or state-regulated businesses.
Which are,
Okay.
what?
Private education
I get
and
that.
and periodic sales. That's the one I worry that it might be a little bit too general. I like that in my recommendation I added 4 times or less per year. Because I'm really trying to go after those, like I said, the Mary Kay parties that you have 4 times a year, you know? Periodic sales, you know, if I'm selling,
What about these people down here every week?
Yeah. Yep, every Sunday.
Someone's not muted.
so I'm thinking if say you sell stuff on Etsy and you want to have, you know, a storefront in your home, would periodic sales fall into that? And is that the type of business we want to have exempt? So I worry that periodic sales, what do you guys think?
Well, I was just wondering, I have to look at Megan, but I think there's a law, state law, on like garage sales. I think you're only allowed so many of them a year.
Yes, there is there, and I would have to research it further, but there's also the cottage industry provisions that are incorporated, and that probably does play into this. But I couldn't tell you from the top of my mind what those standards are.
I thought I remembered that law.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
But could that fall into the state-regulated businesses then? The cottage food one?
So one of the feedbacks, as far as with the instrument instructions, if I'm living close to somebody, you know where I'm going with this. Yeah. Is that a concern, that you do have?
I mean, so I was thinking of when I used to take music lessons. Occasionally, we would do like I took violin lessons, and occasionally we would have like a quartet, and we would have like 4 people come together and play music together. I don't know how often you see. I mean, I suppose drum circles. You can get more than a few people doing a drum circle. I thought that you have to cut it off at some point, so 10 seemed like a good number to me. But I see the concern about 10 drummers in one place making a bunch of noise.
So I think the goal for me is to help the city staff make easier decisions based on more information. So I like the comment that Shelley made, but I think we should also give examples So at the end of that statement, exemptions may be granted due to private education, periodic sales, or state-regulated businesses. For example, one-on-one tutoring services, instrument instruction for groups 10 or less, and so on. So I think to the extent that we add examples to the statement we're putting in the ordinance to help city staff further understand the intent of that statement,
I kind of like that.
it makes it easier, I think.
So it would read, for example, private education, for example, one-on-one tutoring services, or musical instrument instruction for groups less than 10. Periodic sales, for example, product sales with private social events, et cetera, or state-regulated businesses, for example, daycare facilities.
Yeah, it puts a little more definition to a broad statement, I think.
What do we all think about that?
I agree.
Okay. I'll reword this to incorporate that. And I think that we should take a look at the cottage food exemption situation from the state.
So I did just pull it up.
Yeah.
And so the cottage food law guidance is actually an exemption from the licensing requirements.
Okay.
But you can regulate sort of the production of foods within your zoning district. The cottage food law specifically allows for individuals to make up to $78,000 worth of product within a home kitchen as compared to utilizing
doing anything?
a commercial kitchen.
David,
for
ask him,
sale of those
are you there at the boring meeting? We're watching it on Zoom.
Moto
Nice
Z4,
comment.
would you please mute your microphone on Zoom? Moto Z4, please mute your microphone. Thank you.
We're looking for one additional planning commissioner, by the way.
Yeah. It could make this more exciting. So it's an exemption from the licensing requirement for the state.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And so someone's basically making food in their kitchen without requiring a license.
And so hypothetically, if you had a business that you wish to regulate, where that was the mechanism of production, that would not, interfere with state law in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. Thank you for looking into that. Anything else to add for this section? We feel good about this?
Yep.
Okay, I will reword the language and it will come back to you. So the last little bit, I don't know if we're ready to talk about this or if we want to save it. I do plan to have one more meeting, essentially talking about prohibited business types. That's gonna be the bulk of the meeting and then any other little things that we need to touch on before I give you the final draft. When we think about possibly creating a list of prohibited business types, these would be business types that would most likely be unable to comply with the requirements we've laid out. And some of the requirements that stand out in my mind that certain business types might not be able to comply with is the no outdoor storage rule. The rule saying you can only have one accessory building at a maximum of 1,200 square feet dedicated to the home occupation. The rule limiting the number of trips to and from the property, only allowing one non-resident employee, and the number of customers allowed each day. I don't know if y'all have done any homework and thought about this, if we want to touch on it tonight or if we just want to wait until the next meeting. But I want to, remind you that we're going to go there. Any thoughts?
I'd like to wait.
Okay,
I'd wait too.
we can wait.
Give us time to think.
Absolutely. Great. So we're getting close. In your packet that I gave you, I did include at the end is it says page 71, I believe. It says RZB moratorium changes to applicable provisions of city code. So this is me, I'm keeping track of all of the changes that we've made, everything we've added, taken away. It's not the red line version, it's the clean version. But feel free to go back to that and look at that because it has all of the decisions that you've already made in it. And my plan is to have one more meeting on prohibited business types and, like I said, any other outstanding issues, and then come back to a following meeting with this full draft. You guys take a look at it, make any final edits, goes to the council. Once the council, gets everything the way they like, it will go back to the planning commission for a public hearing. And the reason I'm bringing this all up is because we have a deadline that we have.
December 31st, right?
I think it's December 6th, actually, of this year to get this done. So I think we're doing just fine. And yeah, so we'll have one more meeting on the prohibited business types, bring the draft to you after that, and eventually we'll come back here for a public hearing. So.
Perfect. Nice job.
Thanks. Anything else? Good. We're getting good at this. Yeah. Cool. Thank you all.
All right.
Well, we're done with item number 7. We're going to go on to item number 8, discussion on the CI moratorium study, pages 75 through 78, and enclosures.
So for our conversation tonight, we have a PowerPoint, and we also have the memo that was provided to the commission last Friday, sort of addressing the where we've been and where we're headed. So I think if we can start with the PowerPoint, we can just begin working our way through. Should I just turn it?
I'll move the TV board.
And so at our last meeting, we discussed the direction that was given to this body to study by the City Council. And that direction was to further review a specific list of uses, and then whether or not those uses were, what the market demand was for those uses, the appropriateness of this particular district to accommodate additional development, how other communities regulate the uses that were listed in the moratorium, whether there's a need for additional or more prescriptive standards of approval, and finally, whether there are additional design criteria that could be assistive in filling out the city's vision for the CI district. Elizabeth, could you move forward for me? So I've already covered that. We just move right on over that one. And we can just keep on going. So one of the clear direction that we received out of the Planning Commission at the last meeting was that a re-guiding of this district was not something that the commission was interested in pursuing.
Can you just tell me where, because this is page 9. So
That's fine. That's good.
That's good?
Yep, we sort of trotted on through. So the first number of the slides were talking about what we talked about. What was the direction that was given to this body to complete its study? And then specifically with regard to the comprehensive plan, the CI district zoning district mirrors what's the commercial industrial district within your comprehensive plan as well. And so then we're going to talk about So just to back up before we get to this slide, we also discussed that there were code amendments that this body adopted in December of 2021 that had an impact upon the existing district. And you can move forward one, Elizabeth. Sorry. This is the nature of not controlling your own PowerPoint. So that's a summary of what our conversation was at the last meeting. We discussed where we came from, the purpose of the district, its existing standing, its existing purpose language, and concerns that this body had related to future development. And so that's phase 1 of our process here of this study. Phase 2 of that study was that I received direction to go put together some definitions that better incorporated the conversation that we had 2 weeks ago. And so that's what's in your packet tonight. We have the addition of particularized definitions for the uses within the district, and then we also have a modification and draft language proposing uses within the district. What is not included in your packet, and is not part of the conversation this evening, are the performance standards that may apply to those uses. And so that's a third phase of our conversation that would happen 2 weeks from now. So we talked about the need to be transparent about what the vision is for the district, that there is inconsistency between sort of the historic and evolved uses, the language of the code, and what the city council and the planning commission desires to see out of a commercial and industrial space along Lake Drive, given significant concerns around existing residential, where there is residential, especially on the west side, that is adjacent to what is currently commercial industrial zoned uses, and what the types of businesses that would be encouraged to be developed along the Lake Drive corridor. The further direction we received was to clean up those sort of higher impact uses, to be very clear about what they are and whether they continue to be permitted, with an eye towards future development and being really specific about what that looks like. And what that looks like is encouraging development of manufacturing, commercial uses, services, and office. And so the first conversation that we'll have tonight is to talk about those definitions that I mentioned, and also the structure of the recommendation that's coming out of your staff tonight. So one of the ongoing concerns that we have about making significant modifications to the entirety of the district is to create extensive legal nonconformities. And so I included in the memo sort of the historical basis for creation of legal nonconformities. The idea is that you stop the use in the time and in its tracks. And Minnesota statute allows for 4 areas of sort of what we would call improvement of legal nonconformities. They are repair, replacement, restoration, and improvement of the existing structure. And while that has a good effect from a zoning perspective of what you want to see and the types of uses you want to see within a district, one of the significant issues that it creates is that a number of the uses that you have along the CI district right now are fairly new, and it creates a disincentive for reinvestment. And so we want to be really specific when we talk about the type of uses we're encouraging and the type of uses that we're limiting, to minimize the nonconformities that we're creating, so that the uses that are in existence now have access to financing, are able to operate under their, within existing structures. And then lastly, the recommendation that we will be making is to adopt a code provision that allows some forms of expansion in particular cases. So I thought it was important to talk about legal nonconforming uses before we dive into the substance of the definitions. Any questions about that to begin with? All right. So before we get into sort of the meat of what the district what we've proposed, we are recommending adding or modifying these definitions within the existing city code. And so within the packet itself, as compared to on our PowerPoint here, there was a color-coded sheet that indicated whether the definition before you is an existing definition, is a proposed substantive definition, or is a proposed additional definition. And what I would consider the distinction between a proposed substantive definition is that's really the meat of what we've been talking about in terms of our uses. One of these. Does everyone have this?
I don't have that.
I don't have that either.
You don't have this?
No.
There were two parts of it.
Well, that probably would be helpful if everybody had my memo.
Attached to the email, and it's only PDF.
I didn't see it.
I didn't get it either.
Yeah, I know, I went through the.
Would it be possible I think it would just be helpful to be able to work through this, just because it's sort of meaty, that very much explains many of the blank looks that I've been receiving from the Planning Commission tonight. Like, Megan, you're nuts. I have nothing that's color-coded.
Thought I was colorblind.
Well, so I can at least set up the framework for our conversation. So I divided the proposed definitions into 3 categories. The first category is a definition that's already in your code, and that we highlighting it and understanding what it means, and talking about whether we want it to remain. The second category is a substantive definition. It's something like defining contractor shops or a contractor's yard, and putting exact words around what that means and what the use entails. And then the third one is a proposed additional definition that is really more looking at the vision and incorporating some of the definitions that we find in surrounding cities that would add new additional uses to your district. Okay. So we can get started just working through these. An artisan shop, to our cottage food conversation, this is a proposed additional definition. It's one of those that doesn't exist within the code today, but specifically would be, we are proposing as a permitted use throughout the district. It again focuses on retail, and it focuses on creating space for floor area and crafting. This definition is found in many of your surrounding city codes, including Blaine and Roseville, among others. And just as also sort of a point of order, none of the definitions that we're presenting to you tonight come out of a brilliant space in your lawyer's mind. They all come from surrounding cities and that are already used and part of code that is being implemented today. So the second definition is something that exists in your code today, but it's not utilized within the CI district. All of these uses are currently permitted via conditional use permit within the CI district, and part of what we would be recommending is utilizing this definition to further narrow the scope of what an automobile use is. And as we move forward through the actual, the draft ordinance, which you do not have in front of you, you will see that we're also focusing on some definitions that are very specific about what can be completed as part of an automobile use, and that would include prohibiting all salvaging or junk uses. So business commercial or business general, this is an existing use. This is within the code now, and I have it stricken through because it has a really sort of, it goes against the concept that we talked about at our last meeting, which was being more specific about our definitions. It gives really a broad, open, commercial use, which generally require access to large roads, and they serve the day-to-day needs of the neighborhood. And we think we can be more specific, and in being more specific, we can give better clarity about what is permitted within the district. Business services is similar, and this is also within your existing ordinance. It includes any profit-making activity which renders service primarily to other commercial or industrial enterprises, or which services and repairs appliances and machines used in businesses and homes. Now, this is more narrow than that business services, but I thought it was a good opportunity for discussion about whether or not this type of a definition is too broad or is appropriately focused based upon the conversation that we had 2 weeks ago.
I just think it's too broad. I mean, it's specifically the commerce area is supposed to be businesses that provide services that the community uses. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the whole purpose. It's not for large businesses that do most of their business outside the city. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be what that is saying to me.
I think it certainly is open for interpretation for that, and so I think that we can be more successful by narrowing it down to the specific types of uses and how they function within the district. So that's excellent guidance. Thank you. Frank, could you move us to the next slide, please? So something that you commonly find within commercial industrial districts in the Twin Cities is the flexibility to have a craft brewery. And we think it's appropriate here. It would be to allow a craft brewery by conditional use permit. And would again just provide another use that's not inconsistent with the overall purpose of the district. Similarly, catering businesses. So one of the needs that that we are hearing from general metro cities is commercial spaces to be able to prepare food, not only for home-to-home distribution, ordered food prep meals, but also food truck prep. And that provides, so we're recommending the addition of a catering business use and a catering business definition. Which allows for sort of the creation of this commercial kitchen that would be a nice fit within some of those industrial parks that you discussed at your last meeting. Again, has very limited impacts in terms of your surrounding, the surrounding uses, has a beneficial sort of commercial purpose, and again, provides a new diverse use for the district. Any objection to beer and food?
None here.
None here.
No.
Thank you so much. Frank, next slide. Okay, so this is what we have worked on to define these three terms, and they would be stacked together for future uses. So we have a contractor shop, a contractor yard, and then a contractor yard limited. So a contractor shop, an establishment primarily engaged in the on-site or off-site provision of services for the construction, maintenance, cleaning, or repair of buildings, building components, properties on a fee or contractual basis. Such services may include, but are not limited to, plumbing, electrical, heating, and air conditioning, landscaping, roofing, painting, and general construction. So the intent, the type of building that we're intending to capture in this particular provision is City View Electric.
Why didn't you put contractor offices in there? A contractor office is different than a contractor shop. A lot of contracting companies have an actual building that takes care of the planning, estimates, bookkeeping, that's more of a business that we would like to see in there rather than.
I think that's absolutely usable. Thank you so much. I think that absolutely works. Thank you so much. Yep.
So that's instead of general construction or contracting shop, or, I mean, you're just adding that?
So we would say
defining it.
contractor offices. I don't think that there's a, as compared to contractor shop. The contractor shop definition, just to be clear, comes from Roseville.
So by saying a contractor's office, does that limit somebody from having a plumbing operation where they have plumbing trucks there and everything else?
It would not.
Okay, because I don't want to see that happen.
Usually the offices are smaller organizations. If it's a plumbing, office, a smaller business will have their estimating department, their conference room and that sort of thing, but they'll also have their service people, and they maybe have half a dozen service vehicles, but the office would take the calls and that sort of thing.
So what we want to attempt to incorporate in these definitions are uses that allow for low intensity, low impact, but could be potentially larger uses. And so the one question that I would have for you is that would your vision of a contractor office include a fleet of vehicles?
Say that again.
So for example, you have City View Electric, and their business model is very much that there is an office that handles their dispatching, that handles much of the work of running the business of Cityview Electric. And then they have good storage space for the equipment that they install in people's homes, so sort of a warehousing component. And then they also have room for storing their fleet. So, where people come in, they pick up their Cityview Electric truck, and then they go out onto the job and return that truck back to the office at the end of the day. Staff would be supportive of continuing that type of use within the CI district. The office use for example, an architect's office would very much be incorporated and is part of what we have proposed as actually a permitted use for offices within the district.
So really, if you use office shop, I mean.
They're not the same.
Well, they're not, but we don't want to limit it to an office or a shop. We want the complex to be there. I mean, that's what I think.
Would you limit the number of fleet? So right now, it's a broad definition, and it could be,
Well, and this is what I would encourage you to consider as phase 3. And so tonight we're talking about the definitions themselves.
Okay.
Then the structures of how those play out in terms of the actual land use will be part of the specific restrictions associated with the uses in the code, the performance standards.
Just because we're giving definitions doesn't mean it's, that's not what we're talking about. Now we're talking about
Definitions,
Yeah,
I get
we
that, but you're
understand.
saying let's change it from shop to office, so
No,
what
they're
difference
two
does it
different
make?
things.
Well,
So you'd want a
then you'd
definition
both.
of each. You can have a shop
Sure.
independent of the office.
Either
A
or.
lot of big companies have a separate
Yeah,
building
no, I
for
understand.
offices.
Yeah, it's either or.
Right.
so you're okay with allowing both?
Yeah, but we have to talk about size yet, too.
Okay, all right. Just so I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, but offices isn't in there yet, the definitions. We need a definition for that.
Sounds good.
And so then I
would agree with
believe there was a packet handout here that might be helpful for you to be able to follow. And all of these definitions are enclosed within there as well. So then moving on to contractors' yards. So this would be an establishment. So this is, again, a broader use. So if we think about the contractor shop, that is where you have the existing building and then the associated sort of fleet service for those particular uses, including but not limited to those particular uses. Now, a contractor yard versus a contractor yard limited is about intensity. So contractor yard, an establishment providing general contracting, building site maintenance, or building construction services, including outdoor storage, large construction equipment or machinery, trailers, seasonal equipment, office space, fleet maintenance, and loose materials. Okay, so to be clear, that does not provide for any crushing on the site, but this would be consistent with what your existing definition, what your existing code provides for. And so that's the broader of the two uses. A contractor yard limited would be an establishment providing general contracting, all of those listed things, but not limited to fleet vehicles, outdoor storage of trailers, machinery, and other seasonal equipment. So you might have a contractor's shop that has parking. Then you might have a contractor's shop with a contractor's yard limited that would have parking of fleet vehicles plus storage of of trailers, machinery, and other equipment. And then you might have a contractor's shop combined with a contractor yard, where then you would have the more intense construction equipment or machinery with the storage of loose materials, but not any of the crushing uses that we've discussed previously. And again, these are just definitions. That doesn't mean they're incorporated uses within your code. And as we've discussed in terms of the code, just as a reminder, I keep saying it, I sound a bit like a broken record, but those uses that are not listed and those uses that are not specifically permitted by conditional use permit or otherwise are not permitted uses within your code. And so if you don't have it listed as a conditional use, it's not a use that's allowed within the district itself. Frank, can we move to the next slide, please? So these are the existing junk definitions that are within the code today. And we incorporated them here just for your review, so that when we're talking about what the sort of prohibition against a junk use, what that really looks like. And so these are existing definitions that can be further incorporated into the language in the uses within the district itself. They prohibit salvaging, and they prohibit just sort of common examples of junk. All of this, of course, is pulled from Minnesota statute as well. Next slide, Frank. And so now these are really getting on to some of our more substantive definitions that we are recommending adding to the code and really require your engagement and review. So we're proposing adding a definition for limited warehousing and distribution. This is an establishment providing storage and distribution of merchandise and bulk goods, including those associated with limited production and processing uses, and which may involve truck transportation to distribute goods. As you and Jessica have discussed in terms of our home operations, that truck transportation and the type of truck use could also be further limited within the definition. A new use that we are adding, and we're making a recommendation that it be a permitted use in one of our proposed districts, is the addition of low-impact, high-technology manufacturing. And this is a definition that is being utilized quite heavily throughout the Twin Cities. It's designed to attract and capture those manufacturing and assembly services that are utilized that do not create negative impacts on surrounding uses, but that are very much a manufacturing use. An example of that is the SICK semiconductor plant in the city of Bloomington.
Would that be considered a transitional type of business between heavy commercial and residential?
Absolutely. We also have included a new definition for machinery and equipment repair. It's referenced within, next slide, Frank. Thank you. So we have two distinctions here. We have machinery and equipment repair heavy, and then machinery and equipment repair light. The heavy use is designed for more of those machine and welding shops, which are current conditional uses within your district. The light use is for a furniture, like I would give an example of a furniture shop or a reupholstery shop. And so again, you're doing maintenance and reconstruction work. There may be some odors associated with that use, and so they're regulated by CUP. But we're drawing a distinction between the more heavy reconstruction that involves those sort of welding and machine shop uses, tool repair services, and other repair services that would have been previously captured under your business services definition.
This is good. I like it.
Next slide, please, Frank. Or City Administrator Merkisco. Thank you. And so we are also recommending right now, there is a definition of manufacturing within your code. That is the second definition on the screen. And we are recommending that we revise this to be similar to the machinery and equipment repair heavy and light. We utilize a manufacturing light and a manufacturing heavy. The manufacturing light definition includes the production and repair of a list of uses. It would also include the manufacturing of surgical instruments, processing, food packing, packing of food products or cosmetics, and again, optical instruments, electronics, devices. So again, sign making, we talked about one of the newer businesses within the city as a sign manufacturer. That would be the type of use contemplated by this manufacturing light. And this use is actually pulled from the western suburbs and is quite frequently used as the transitional manufacturing use around the Lake Minnetonka area.
This is Bob. I have a question for city staff. When looking at these definitions, does this give you more guidance in interpretation of proposed projects, so forth and so on? Are we hitting the mark by adding a little bit more information to make your jobs easier through these definitions? Is this helping?
So, looking at overall when you're doing, when you're trying to explain things to either applicants or property owners, we often start with the definition so we know we're on the same page of what we're talking about. Because I will tell you that various different people, if you say the word, manufacturing, that might mean a very different thing to certain people. But what it does is if you start as a base there and say, this is what our definition is, and you start there, then you go into the code, then you have a good base. As Megan will tell you, definitions are just for guidance, and they're not the ordinance. So there are some times when you look at a definition and you say, well, it doesn't quite fit, but this is the best we're going to use, and this is the interpretation, and that's when I rely on minutes. So these discussions that you're having today gives us guidance for future policy interpretation, because we come back to the minutes and say, you know what, the way they were going is this direction. That's why we know that this is, what it means. So we do value your conversations and your feedback, and then also, again, having a multitude of definitions is really a good base.
That was the purpose of my question. Thank you.
Any thoughts about all of the words that I have said so far? All right. Moving to the next slide.
One clarification here, Megan. So are you saying that we would have manufacturing light or manufacturing heavy, or are you asking them which one would they rather have in the code?
The recommendation at this point in time would be to add both definitions. We have manufacturing as currently defined is the second definition. And we would recommend revising that to have the light definition and then the heavy definition, which could be used in different areas of the code within the ordinance itself.
Excuse, the heavy definition doesn't seem complete to me.
So one of the issues we believe with the heavy definition is that as it stands today, with the sort of like the possibly generating some nuisances does not provide clear guidance to staff. What we did was utilize the existing definition to say things that are not light manufacturing are heavy, but we certainly could be more targeted on what that is, and list out some of the uses that we would specifically consider heavy manufacturing.
Yeah, I think it needs that. Don't you?
Yeah.
How about you guys?
Yeah, I think it needs more clarification.
A new use that we're, and definition that we're proposing adding is a recreational facility commercial. And so an example that I might give of this type of a facility would be vertical endeavors, or a paintball place, something along those lines. Climbing gyms would be an appropriate use within this district. And so we've added that as an option.
We have needed that for a while.
And then a salvage facility, we've specifically defined the use, and it would not be permitted within the district either by CUP or by IUP or as a permitted use. But a commercial use where salvaging, scavenging, or recycling of any goods, including motor vehicles, motor vehicle parts, etc., is conducted. And so that's a defined, we've added that defined term to be very specific that we do not allow salvage facilities within the district. And then lastly, wholesale establishment. This is a new, an additional definition that sort of flushes out some of the existing wholesale uses that are within the district, but that we would be supportive of adding and being specific about what a wholesale establishment means as compared to that business services general definition that we started with.
Can you define further for me salvage facility versus junk and junk buildings, shops, yards? Can you give me a little more clarity on what the difference is?
Absolutely. Junk has a defined term within the code as it exists today. And our salvage facility definition is just clarifying that the commercial use of junk is not a permitted use within the district. So junk is not permitted, and that you cannot have a business that operates to sell junk. Be the difference between those two things.
But we would allow salvage.
We would not.
We would not.
No.
Good.
And so what we wanted to do was make sure that we were clear about what that meant.
Yep.
And what you'll do is, as we move on to our next slide, we can talk about what we've proposed within the district itself. So we are bringing to you tonight something that I heard that this commission was not particularly interested in discussing, but we are maintaining our recommendation. We're bringing you two districts this evening. And we are recommending a West Side CI district and an East Side CI district. And the reason for that really goes back to this creation of the nonconformities and what uses are appropriate when they have other industrial users next to them, as compared to uses that are appropriate that are adjacent to residential users. And in crafting a district that gives really clear guidance to applicants as well as to staff, we found that it was difficult to say that it's something that where we didn't want to create nonconformity within our existing district, then to say, but it would not be allowed, but then to create, let me start over again. We did not want to create a significant number of nonconformities within the district, and for that reason sought to define them and separate them into the west side and the east side, where there would be less intense uses on the west side and more intense uses on the east side.
So further clarity around that. When you say west side and east side, you're talking of Lake Drive.
Of Lake Drive, that's correct. Absolutely.
So the distinction is clear that we're talking about Lake Drive, east side and west side.
That's correct. And so what we have in front of you this evening is a proposed purpose for this new West Side district. It would be intended to provide a range of low-intensity industrial uses, commercial, restaurant, and retail uses compatible with nearby residential neighborhoods. The district excludes more intensive industrial uses while allowing light manufacturing uses, such as research and development, low-impact high-technology manufacturing, biotechnology, small-scale distribution, alongside commercial, office, business services, and institutional uses. Access must be provided to collector or arterial roadways as specified by the City of Columbus Comprehensive Plan. And so this would be the overall proposed purpose statement for your West Side district.
I like it.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I think it defines it. I think where we want to go.
Okay. And so moving on, so what we have done is we've pulled the existing permitted uses from your CI district now, and we've added a number of uses to this west side. Specifically, we would continue to allow all of the existing permitted uses within the CI district, and we would add offices without outdoor storage and artisan shops to permitted uses.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
And then moving on.
So
sorry.
I'm sorry. So, Bob, so when we looked at permitted uses, so this is where it would help. So permitted uses, artisan shop, and someone would say, well, what is that?
Yep.
So that's when I would go back to the definition section and use that definition section saying, okay, this is what it is, and this is the confines of this use, because I will tell you, someone will tell me what they think it means.
That's right.
And it really probably wouldn't fit, it might not fit, but this is where I would go back to the definition and say, okay, this is what we agreed on, and if it's outside that, then it's not a permitted use.
Understand completely, yes.
Yeah.
And then the next slide has our list of conditional uses. And this is where those definitions make a difference. And so within this district, we would allow contractor shops, which again are contractor shops without the yard. Contractors' yards, so contractor shops, I'm just going to go back to our practical definition of City View Electric. That's what we're intended to capture here. Contractor's yard limited, so none of the heavy machinery, no storage of outdoor piles. Then we would also have our new brewery definition. We'd retain the licensed daycare definition. Limited production and processing, so that use was the one that was specifically where you might have a manufacturing component, but within an industrial park. And so it has language that talks about why that it's a production use, which what you might in your performance standards restrict to only standalone businesses, but because of the nature of the production and processing, it was appropriate for a shared use in another business park. And that use is actually pulled in reference to the industrial park we discussed at our last meeting. Then we've incorporated manufacturing light, and this is where looking back at those definitions make a difference. So that manufacturing light are those less intense uses. Those are things like the production or repair of small machines or electronic parts, woodworking cabinet building, testing facilities and laboratories, apparel production, sign making, assembly of prefabricated parts, or manufacturing assembly of surgical instruments, optical instruments or devices, things of that nature. We also have included, so that's would be a conditional use, a new conditional use within the district. We've also focused on that low impact, high technology manufacturing, the machinery and equipment repair light. So you'll see that the trend here is to retain only those light uses. So we have the limited contractor's yard, the light manufacturing, machinery and equipment repair light, and that is in sort of response to, again, the needs that are presented by that surrounding residential.
Can you distinguish, and maybe this is work yet to be done by Planning Commission and the City Council, but on the bottom row, the third row, vehicle services in one box versus automotive in another. Can you explain the differences between the two as we have generally defined it? So the third row and the fourth box over is vehicle service and repair, and then in the next box over it says automotive. Can you give us some sort of a distinction as to what the interpretation is between those two?
Yes, absolutely. So in our historic district, we utilized, so previously the language that we used was new and used automobile sales, and we also utilized the language of automobile repair. And so what the two new definitions are the first, the automobile, mobile home, travel trailer, farm implement, and construction machinery sales. That's our existing definition that lives within the code today. Specifically prohibits the salvage operations or junkyards associated with those, but would permit minor motor vehicle repair and replacement. So those are your oil changes, things of that nature. And then Okay, and then the vehicle service and repair businesses are where you wouldn't have a sales component associated with the repair use. And we would allow for both of those uses via conditional use permit. And so what I would say in terms of our existing uses within the district is that this automotive mobile home, travel trailer, farm implement, and construction machinery sales would encompass the Waldocks dealership, but then you would have, for the vehicle service and repair businesses, that would be a standalone body shop, but again, not a salvage operation or a junkyard.
So automotive sales on the west side, it's currently in our ordinances. Is that something that we are still considering as an allowable type of business up and down Lake Drive on the west side?
So you would have to make any of them non-conforming?
No, I think it says automotive sales, so it's automotive, comma, and all those others sales.
Yeah.
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's in the second one, auto sales.
Yeah, auto sales. So that's my question. Is that an allowable type of business that we want to include into the commercial industrial district on the west side? Is the gateway coming into our community from that side of town? Are we allowing, is that what we want to allow? Because that's what this is stating, as I understand it, that we currently allow it. Going forward, then, do we want to allow that? Is that the type of business that we want to bring in on the west side of the Lake Drive area? And I'm posing the question because I've heard it come up several times.
I think part of what's come up too is land use and the best use of taxable, the building size on property, that a lot of times you'll have automotive sales and it's small building with large land use of non-taxable items.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt this is tough discussion, but I think we have to resolve it in our minds what we want to allow going forward, because this is big right here.
So again, then, the existing ones would be legal non-conforming if that was to be the case.
That's correct. And so from just a brief overview of the West Side District, you do have at least 4 existing businesses that would be then rendered legally non-conforming.
Yeah.
Megan, are you going to change this contractor shops to contractor offices?
Certainly, if that's the direction of this commission. The definition at this point in time, as I understand, is the same.
All right.
But no, I don't have any objection to that language, so long as the definition remains the same.
Well, that's a good point that you bring up, Bob. I think we talked about
It's not a good
dealerships.
use of land.
Yeah, use of land. And so if somebody has a dealership now it's non-conforming. So that means if they sell that property, it can't go back into that CUP then?
A conditional use permit runs with the land. Whether it's non-conforming or not, you can sell the business. So business owners have rights, even though they're legal non-conforming. So they can continue, but again, there are some other things, as Megan described earlier, that you will have. You'll have sometimes financing problems or expansion problems or those sorts of things that you will have business owners or future business owners not appreciate. I'm just wondering, Megan, though, and to address Bob Barron's concerns, I will say that the existing businesses, most of them do all 3. They have sales, they have service, and repair. So while if we're talking about new sales or just used car sales, I mean strictly that, we don't have any existing businesses today. But I think if you want to not have legal non-conforming, maybe you can say vehicle, sales, service, and repair, because then they have to have a component of all three. And that would take care of, I think, of most of them being now in the conforming bucket.
That sounds good.
Excellent suggestion.
I like that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To our conversation about nonconforming uses, one of the things that we have added into our proposed districts is flexibility for expansion of nonconforming uses subject to specific standards. And, you know, sort of to my earlier point about potential for disinvestment when it's still very much a viable use or when it's been a new investment in the community. And this is a provision that's utilized quite frequently around the metro area. Most recently, our office worked on one of these based out of the city of St. Paul. But it allows the city council to approve, modify a non-conforming use permit utilizing its conditional use permit and planned unit development process. And so what it would do is it would allow that you couldn't have the expansion of other uses, but for the business owner who was made non-conforming by an ordinance revision, they could come before this commission and then eventually the city council and apply and show a site plan and make a request that they be permitted to expand their business so long as certain conditions are met. And we think that that is a nice balance between maintaining the existing uses and ensuring that there's the ability to expand those uses where appropriate, but without adding mirrored uses or similar uses within the district. Elizabeth, could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So now we're moving on to our East Side District. You'll see that this definition is identical to what currently lives within the city code today. It's again looking at, it retains all of the things that we discussed at our last meeting related to general commerce, business, retail sales, wholesale sales, and manufacturing. It includes retail outlets, service stations, eating and drinking establishments, and is the identical purpose definition that we have in the code for the CI district as a whole now. We can move to the next slide.
Megan, I
Yes.
think that looking at the permitted uses, but if you look at the next slide, it says west again.
Oh.
So I'm thinking it should say east, just so I didn't
Thank
go
you
back.
so much. I appreciate it. So the proposed permitted uses, we've actually expanded the list of permitted uses for this East District. We've, again, brought in offices and artisan shops, but we've added low-impact, high-technology manufacturing because we heard that that was something that was of particular interest to this commission, and then manufacturing light. And so that would include your pharmaceutical uses, that would include the furniture fabricator, the light manufacturing list of uses that we had in our definitions, and those would in fact be recommended as permitted uses. So again, that's pushing that more intense light manufacturing, but still very beneficial use and incentivizing that development on the east side of Lake Drive. Any feedback with regards to adding those 4 permitted uses? That's good. And then moving on to our proposed conditional uses. And so this is where you will find that broader form of uses. The heavy manufacturing comes in. The broader contractor's yard, which has the more intense equipment, would be allowed, along with all of the uses that we described in our West Side district. And we would also include, this would be our adult uses district, and that's where our adult use it lives today as well. And so I think the real conversation is around, again, so this is very much of a commercial industrial use today. These are uses that do not have residential impacts. They can accommodate, from staff's perspective, a more intense use. But we are also being very clear in our definitions that, the crushing or, concrete mixing uses are not permitted within this district. But you would have storage of exterior piles, you would have storage of large equipment, of course, subject to performance standards to be discussed at the next meeting. And so with that, we stand ready to take any of your feedback or thoughts regarding the sort of proposed district that we've envisioned, these two sides. The next step after we receive your feedback this evening is for us to draft those performance standards and bring them to you for your review. So we've talked about the what, we've talked about the where, and then we're going to talk about what the practical impact is. What do they look like, and how would they pop up within the district?
Well, it sounds like what we've been talking about a long time. It's just kind of coming together now. But I like the idea of defining what's what goes where, instead of the mixed up thing we had going. So.
Yeah, I like the east and west side, and I'm assuming, because a lot of the talk for the last couple of years has been the traffic, and that'll be kind of addressed as we go forward, I'm assuming.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that we've been thoughtful to do in those definitions I think we can be more specific about what type of trucks are permitted for those expanded uses that we've listed, and really with a focus and an eye towards limiting that truck traffic, while also recognizing that Lake Drive serves as a connector road between 35W and 35E, and so it naturally attracts much of that traffic along the way.
Anything else?
No?
Nope.
Oh, very nice job. Thank you very much for your help and support.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Mr. Chair and Planning Commission's members, I just want to address the audience. As all of you have been sitting through the discussion this evening, if you have comments or you have something that you want to give feedback to the Planning Commission and or Megan as we go through the process, we encourage you to email us with your comments. We will incorporate them in the packets. We will just distribute them through the Planning Commission, and that's how they'll get incorporated into the record. So if you want to do that, you can email me, you can email Frank, and we will then disseminate it throughout the Planning Commission, so that the next discussion, it might include some of your comments. So if you need our email addresses, just call, look on the website. We'll be happy to give them to you. And again, it doesn't have to be formal. It could just be a couple of comments just in an email with bullet points.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, we'll go on to item number 9, open public forum. Is there anybody who'd like to get up and make a statement or a comment? Yeah, but you can still get up and make a comment if you want.
About other things.
Right? That's what open, I mean, as long.
Open that one.
So my name is Donald Waldock, 121 Lake Drive, no. You want my home phone, or home or business?
Business is good.
Yeah, 13821 Lake Drive, Northeast Forest Lake. I'll say Columbus when I'm proud of Columbus again. I would like to know, you could say feedback, where's it coming from? How do we give our feedback? She just said this now, but all this stuff is going on. How do we give our feedback? You saying you got feedback. Where'd your feedback come from?
Well, it depends on what point you're looking at. We do
You
have.
kept saying lots of times, we got your feedback. I wrote it down. Where did the feedback come from? Is this public?
Well, who said that?
Megan.
You'd keep saying that a lot.
As
I
a
heard it a
feedback
lot.
from us.
Well, I mentioned feedback on the previous with a residential zone business. I think Megan.
Maybe a better word for me so we don't have to
No.
belabor this. How do we give you feedback, what we think this should look like versus just for planning commission members?
I think that's where Elizabeth
Yeah.
was just trying to clarify it for you. So, just so you know, every planning commission meeting we have a public open forum for people to come up.
I know
and
that,
discuss.
I know that, yep.
Ron.
I know that.
Elizabeth, you want to address again?
I would say that what Megan was referring to is, feedback that she's heard maybe from council discussions, whether it's planning commission previous discussions, whether it was from me. I happen to give a lot of feedback to her, so, and then I get a lot of phone calls and emails. Again, when people funnel things through me, I try to disseminate as much as I can to others, which is why I encourage all of you to give feedback, because that's how we kind of frame what we present. So like I said, I would encourage everyone, if you heard what was going on tonight, you have copies, and it doesn't have to be formal, but again, everything you give to us, we will.
I hear you. It has to be formal. It has to be listened to. Just a comment doesn't work. What I'm seeing laid out here from the attorneys is really what it started at. They don't want this Waldock development to look like we started it to look like when we met with you a year and a half ago. I'm seeing there can't be equipment parked there. We got problems here, gang. If that east side, if that west side, you can do it on the east side and you can't do it on the west side, we got problems. And if this is just it looks like it's boilerplate. She said this is what Roseville does. I said that originally at this meeting, just go look at other cities and copy what they're doing. Is that really what we did? Are we trying to appease a couple neighbors here? You don't need to answer that, but if we're going to give feedback, you've got to take it into consideration besides just comments. This is important. And I know you're taking it as an important thing, but you know what? I think there's there's just an underlying thing here that I kind of don't like. You got the east and the west. That's black and white. What are we doing? How do you figure you can do it two ways?
So one of the process that we're going through at this point in time is that we have a moratorium in place. And the statutory requirement of the moratoria is that the Planning Commission undertake a planning study. And the feedback that I mentioned was part of our conversation that we had at our last Planning Commission meeting, talking about existing uses and impacts of existing uses. And as I understand it, I'm new to Columbus, but this is a conversation that's been ongoing for a number of years. And so the goal of these meetings is to undertake that study. And so those comments, as you provide them to Elizabeth, will certainly be included in this packet, will be discussed, and raised as part of the ordinance drafting as we move forward. That's the purpose of this process.
So on some of the things when you say that, I hear you. So who come up with the idea to put a brewery on the west side? I'm just saying, that's just how ridiculous this is, guys. Just reading this as a layman, as a business person, we're going to put a brewery in on the west
I
side.
guess, Don, sometimes we kind of open the door for everything, kind of.
I know.
I mean, whether it goes in there or not, I don't know, but what do
But
we
it's what
do
you
with?
are saying, what you are saying is no heavy trucks, no big equipment, and no contractors. You got the grinding out, you got the grinding out, so that's out, you know, there's no gonna be any
You mean the
regrinding.
backhauling?
Other than what Rybex is doing now, which good, but it really is what you're saying is you don't want big contractors in there. Isn't that what we're saying?
Ron, I think we're listening to good feedback here. And I think
Thank
the
you for listening
responses
to
aren't
me, I'm
really-
through, thank you.
Well, thanks,
the
Don.
responses aren't really, you know, we're not going to get into.
Yeah,
an
I
argument.
understand.
So we just want to listen to the feedback, and that's what we do well. And so I think that, you know, by listening to testimony, we heard Don speak, and I think that that's valuable information that we need and
I
need to
agree, I
process
agree
going
with
forward.
that, Bob, but,
Yep.
you know, they've got a great business that came in there. It's Street Smart. And we had no problems with that. I think that was a plus, Don. But anyway, we're going to go on. Anybody else? John?
13824 Lake Drive. Actually, you know, it sounds like we're going in the right direction. I just want to make a couple comments on the residential thing, and she was talking about there's lots of residents you're going to send out a thing, and it was mentioned that hopefully they'll look and some will read and, oh, we won't comply. I'm here to tell you, you got more than 50 or 60 homes that are going to go out of business and lose their houses when they don't comply. If in fact you have to, and she was right saying, hey, we got to be a little careful about this, because you're right, it could be an open deal. So you might want to think about the direction you're going to go when, you know, because these people don't have any place to go. You know, you're right, we all have guys that have businesses at their homes. And that's something that you really need to think about. And then the other thing on businesses, we'd like people in Columbus, businesses here for people in Columbus. I love all the Columbus residents. I love them dearly, but there's not a business in Columbus that if they had to rely on Columbus citizens would be in business next month. You need everybody. And so we should allow somebody to come in and should Amazon come in with a big, you know, we probably don't have enough land for them, but that may be something different. But there's all these companies coming in can do business all over the nation. Street Smart's in 15, 20 states, you know, so.
And they're coming in, right?
And they're in, yes. So that's what I'm saying. It was mentioned, and just so we're not, you know, there's a lot of, any business coming in here needs to do business, hopefully all over the nation, really, you know. And then just, you know, the truck thing, we're talking about trucks, and nothing happens until a truck starts up in the morning. There's none of us do anything until somebody someplace started a truck up to come in. So we can't, well, let's let them trucks be in some other city, not in this city. I mean, you want to kind of think of that as the whole picture. You know, we can't just, okay, here's how we're going to do it. There's trucks running every day, so thank you.
Thank you, John.
John, yep.
William Krebs, 14746 Lake Drive. I want you to, you touched on this, Bob. I own one of the buildings where there's an auto repair shop in there, and there's also auto sales, American Auto Sales and L&R Automotive. I want you to verify what you said about letting as far as I'm concerned, I question why there's a question about auto sales down there and auto repair. They all kind of go together. I mean, normally when we sold cars down there, when I was there, we fixed them in the shop, cleaned them up, sold them, whatever, and then there's a repair shop behind. So I kind of want some clarification on that, because if you look at the Frontier or Waldox, whatever it is now, that's tractor sales and repair down there also. So what's the difference between that and auto repair and auto sales together?
So are we responding, or are we just taking feedback?
I don't think we want to get into a real discussion on it, but I can see where you're coming from.
Well, it needs to be discussed because
Right.
it's an issue. I built the building down there, and eventually that building, probably in the next few years, is going to be sold. I have a CUP down there for both businesses in there. And when that comes to sell, that's part of my retirement. So it's a big deal if somebody comes along and wants to, now maybe some construction company, some plumbing company buys the whole building and moves in there. The values in Columbus with those businesses down there those property values have more than doubled in some cases. So I guess I'm looking for some
I thought the
verification.
CUP goes with the land.
It does, but,
But what?
well, we're.
That's if they continue in business. Right.
Exactly.
Not if they don't. I tell you what, William, and I think just to Mr. Waldux and John and Don and everybody out there, I think Elizabeth had the right thing. You type out your thoughts, and hopefully it comes to us, and it comes to the council. Remember, we're just the planning commission, then the council gets the final.
I get this, but person to person is always better than
It is,
reading
it is.
something on paper. So I was on the city council for 8 years, okay? That whole area down there before you guys were even around or even knew what was going on, most of that business got pushed to that area because it wasn't being allowed on the freeway district. A lot of these things you're talking about, they're supposed to be out on the freeway district. That's where they're supposed to be. You talk about truck traffic. You complained about it when the asphalt plant went in, then you put the Love's truck stop in. I don't have a problem with it, but now you're talking about truck traffic on Lake Drive. It seems like,
Well, I can see your point. Sometimes we take little points that everybody says.
and I'm getting a little off track,
Yeah,
right?
I understand, William,
Well-
but 20 years ago, I was on the planning commission here, and we talked about the entertainment. And if you look at the comp plan back in 2000, it was that whole area where the racing track was supposed to be entertainment.
Right.
And then it changed.
Yeah, and then
And then the big box stores came in. Now they're out again.
Yep.
Things happen quick. And you guys, the ones that's, hopefully you foresee that before it happens. And you try to change your business plans or your business models or whatever. But I really think what Elizabeth is talking about, we'll listen to you. It's not that we're closing up our ears or nothing. It's just that there's a problem down there. It started probably 100 years ago or whenever they made that residential area right there. And then they got an industrial right next to it. How do you cushion that? And whether it's trucks or not, that's the issue. But I really think you send emails to Elizabeth and we'll set it on the planning commission table and you come that night, watch the website, and you want to say, we'll open the door and.
And I like what Bob's been saying about the residential businesses. There's a big problem. And Elizabeth knows this, Jessica knows this. We had a guy 3 doors down from my house. 4 or 5 years when I was on the council, we fought that guy and we couldn't get him out of there. He wouldn't leave, and finally the guy that owned the house sold it, booted him out. But now we got another one on Broadway and another one farther down Broadway. And you don't need to send a drone in. All you have to do is get on the website and look at the latest aerial views, and you can tell what's going on. So,
And it's a big issue, and that's what we're trying to address.
And I really-
And you know it, you were on the
I really
city
get-
council, you hear people come in and complain, no matter what decision you make.
and I appreciate what you're doing there because we have a problem. They're coming from other cities, they're being pushed out, and they're coming here. And the realtors are telling them, you can bring your business and run it out of your house. Well, residential's residential. We got people that like their four-wheelers, their snowmobiles, their hobbies, hot rods, whatever, horses, you name it, we all have to put up with somebody's stuff, and we get that. But to live next door to an auto repair shop, cars coming and going is ridiculous, so.
Well, you were involved when John's Black Dirt was going on.
Yeah, we solved the problem.
Well, the problem is we lived in it.
Yep. No, you lived it, but we solved it.
Well, it got solved.
It got solved. It was one of the best things we could have lost in court with the CUP.
I know, that's what, yeah. So it was really forced late contracting, but anyway, how about that?
And the other thing too to take in consideration is those businesses down there right now, whether you like them or not, they're generating huge taxes. Just our shop down there went from 13 grand when we built it to 22,000. And there's some of those construction companies are well over $100,000 a year in taxes. Granted, it doesn't go all to Columbus, but it's big taxes, and we're paying big fiscal disparities still too, which isn't right. So,
But we're trying to work on that.
I think if I could sum it up, I'm just going to give you one thing.
Yes, sir.
Managed growth is what we're trying to work on.
I get that, but let's not forget about the businesses and the residents that have been here that built Columbus, and they're sitting behind me.
Yeah,
So,
understand.
yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you're doing a good job with the residential stuff, so keep it up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else?
I'll be really quick.
Okay, I've never seen a realtor be real quick, but go ahead.
Stan Friedner, I'm with Newmark. I live up in Lindstrom. I just wanted to really just give you a few bullet points. I've had a lot of discussions in the past with Elizabeth, and I've brought a lot of companies to the town here, and Columbus has always had a great reputation and been very pro-business, and I really hope that it stays that way. Couple of comments, and I thought Megan did a great job with most of the code that she went through. Something to keep in mind, she pulled code from Roseville, and then she pulled code from Minnetonka. Those are completely different cities than here. So one thing to think about is the CI district has, excuse me, it has no city water and sewer. So the types of businesses that you're going to get there, if you go up and look at businesses in Ham Lake or further up 65 in East Bethel, those are the types of businesses that are looking to come on Lake Drive. So just something to keep in mind. When we look at breweries, the brewery in Lino Lakes just went out of business, so that's probably not something that's going to happen or take. Anything that's retail, I don't think there's going to be a lot of footing here on Lake Drive. So I really feel like a commercial/industrial type use, just like it's named, is what's going to be there long term. Couple things from a real estate perspective I wanted to mention was values. If you really do this split, which I think is a terrible idea, your values are going to be way higher on the east side than they're going to be on the west side, just because you're going to have so many more uses on the east. And with uses, and maybe I misheard this, but he talked about if we don't have the use there, we need to tweak it, we can apply for a variance. That's really difficult. It's hard to represent a company and have them come through the city process and apply for a variance because it's just difficult for them and it's a big process and it's hard for companies to think that that's going to be a good idea. So they're just going to move on and go up to the next city like a Wyoming. The other thing that I thought was a great point that Elizabeth made was appraised values. So if you have these non-conforming uses, and I have a business and now it's not conforming anymore, and I want to expand or I want to refinance it, it might be hard for me to go get a loan or take money out of my property. So just some kind of bigger, high-level things I wanted you guys to think about while I was sitting here. So
thank you.
Hope that helps, and we'll definitely put a email together with our thoughts.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Anybody else? How about the other room? Don't even know if anybody's over there.
There's like 2 people. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's only 2 left.
I can't hear. What?
2 people left over there.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll close the public forum and we'll open up information. Item number 10, Planning Commission report.
I don't have anything, thank you.
Barb?
I have nothing.
Bob?
Nope, nothing on this end.
I have nothing. The associate, Frank, you got associate planners report, item number 11?
Just a brief one. Ella just reminded me that it is the 16th birthday of the city of Columbus.
It's the what?
It's our Sweet 16.
It's
We
the
incorporated 16 years ago today.
Oh,
Awesome, awesome.
Oh, woo-hoo.
Yeah.
do my
Thank
math
you.
real quick. It was 2000 what?
2006.
Okay.
Nice.
You did it quicker than I did. Reminder, item number 12, attendance city council. I guess I'll be there next Wednesday. Item number 3, anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Chris, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it, Barb.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote.
Chris, aye.
Ron, aye.
Bob, aye.
Guess we got a forum. We're done.
Good.